From a poor Austrian village to the bright lights of Hollywood. From lifting scrap weights in barns to lifting the world's biggest trophies. From broken English to global domination. Bodybuilding icon. Action movie legend. Political powerhouse. The story of Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't just about muscles. It's about an unstoppable mind inside an unstoppable body. This is how he became a millionaire. Chapter 1. From the Alps to the Iron. Arnold Schwarzenegger was born in 1947 in the small village of Thal, Austria. Life there wasn't easy. His family was poor, his father a strict police officer, his mother a homemaker. Their house had no plumbing, no refrigerator, and barely any heat in the winter. But there was something about young Arnold that didn't quite fit into the quiet, alpine routine. While other boys were dreaming of soccer or surviving the cold, Arnold had visions far beyond the mountains, visions of America. At the age of 10, he saw a magazine featuring Reg Park, Mr. Universe, turned actor, playing Hercules. That moment changed everything. It wasn't just the muscles. It was the transformation, the power, the fame, and the escape. From that day on, Arnold set his sights on becoming the strongest man in the world. And then, the biggest star in Hollywood. He began training with whatever he could find. Old weights, broken equipment, even lifting logs and heavy tools. By age 15, he was already more disciplined than most grown men. While others partied, Arnold trained twice a day. He read about anatomy, nutrition, and mental focus. He was building more than just a body. He was building a blueprint for escape, and he was strategic. He knew that bodybuilding could be his golden ticket. It was international. It was visual. If he could dominate on that stage, people would notice. In 1965, at just 18 years old, he joined the Austrian army, not because he loved military life, but because it offered food, shelter, and just enough stability to keep training. He even went AWOL during basic training to compete in his first competition and won. That victory was small, but symbolic. It proved to him that he could defy rules and still come out on top. Soon after, he caught the attention of European bodybuilding circles. His massive frame, discipline, and charisma were undeniable. It was only a matter of time before the world would know his name. But Arnold didn't just want to be the best in Europe. He wanted America, the land of opportunity, the land of Reg Park, the land of Mr. Universe. And in 1968, with barely any money and even less English, he boarded a plane to Los Angeles, armed with little more than a dream and an iron will. He didn't arrive as a millionaire, but he had already begun to build something far more powerful than money: momentum. Chapter 2. The immigrant with iron in his veins. When Arnold landed in Los Angeles in 1968, he didn't look like a lost immigrant. He looked like a Greek god dropped from the sky, towering, chiseled, and already glowing with purpose. But inside, he was scared and broke. He barely spoke English. He didn't know anyone. He lived in a small apartment with other bodybuilders, surviving on canned food, protein shakes, and dreams. What Arnold lacked in money, he made up for in obsession. He trained at the now legendary Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, which was more of a sweatbox than a temple at the time. There, he was a curiosity. Locals stared at his sheer size, but most doubted he'd go far. His accent was thick, his last name unpronounceable, and his goals too outrageous. But Arnold didn't care. He worked harder than anyone. 2 workouts a day, endless posing sessions, strict diets, and in between reps, he practiced English by watching TV shows, repeating every word with painful precision. He also studied business, advertising, and charisma, not for fun, but because he knew success wouldn't come from muscles alone. Then came the competitions. In 1970, at just 23, Arnold won Mr. Olympia, the most prestigious title in bodybuilding. He was the youngest person ever to do it. And he didn't stop. He won it again, and again, 7 times in total. But here's the twist. Arnold wasn't just interested in trophies. He was building a brand. He began injecting personality into the sport. He smiled on stage. He talked trash. He posed like an artist. People loved it or hated it. Either way, they remembered him. He wasn't just lifting weights. He was lifting the entire image of bodybuilding into mainstream culture. Behind the scenes, Arnold was already thinking bigger. He invested his early earnings into real estate, buying small properties and flipping them. By the time most people thought he was just a bodybuilder, Arnold was already a millionaire. All this, while most people still couldn't pronounce Schwarzenegger. Chapter 3. The accent nobody wanted. Hollywood didn't knock on Arnold's door. In fact, it slammed it shut in his face. When he told people he wanted to be an actor, they laughed. Agents said his accent was too thick, his body was too weird, and above all, his last name? "You'll never be on a poster with that," one said. "Change it or forget about acting." But Arnold wasn't built to blend in. He didn't want to be the next someone. He wanted to be the first Arnold. So he did what he always did, trained. Not his muscles this time, but his voice, his acting, and his presence. He hired coaches, practiced lines until they felt like part of him. And he said something that stuck with him forever. If they say your weakness is your accent, make it your signature. His first big break came in 1970 with the movie Hercules in New York. It was terrible. They dubbed over his voice. The acting was wooden. The plot was nonsense. But Arnold didn't care. It was proof. Proof that he could get on a set, that he could be seen. Still, it would take nearly a decade before anyone in Hollywood took him seriously. Then came a low-budget film with a strange pitch, a dystopian future, killer robots, and very few lines. Just what Arnold needed. In 1984, The Terminator was born, directed by a then-unknown James Cameron. The film gave Arnold the role of a lifetime, a terrifying, silent machine. Fewer lines meant less focus on the accent. But his body? It was perfect. He looked like a weapon forged in hell. He only had 17 lines in the entire film, but one of them changed everything. "I'll be back." It was delivery, timing, weight. It became legend. Suddenly, the guy with the impossible name and the ridiculous accent was box office gold. Studios realized they didn't need to fix Arnold. They needed to build around him. Action roles rained down. Commando, Predator, Total Recall, Conan. Arnold didn't just break into Hollywood. He exploded into it. Chapter 4. From box office to ballot box. When Arnold said he came from another world, he wasn't kidding. And we're not talking about Terminator. We're talking about entering California politics as an Austrian immigrant with a past filled with explosions, iconic quotes, and ripped t-shirts. It all started in the 1990s. While continuing to dominate the box office, Arnold was increasingly involved in issues of public health, education, and children's physical activity. He no longer wanted to be seen as just a muscle-bound guy. He wanted to be taken seriously. And while the world knew him for destroying villains on screen, in real life, he was gearing up to govern. In 2003, California was in crisis. A declining economy, power outages, and angry citizenry. And then it became clear to Arnold. It was his time. Live, during a late-night show, he announced it without a script, without protocol. "I'm going to run for governor of California." Silence. Laughter. Disbelief. An actor, governor? But he'd done it before. Being a professional bodybuilder as a poor immigrant, breaking Hollywood with an accent no one understood. Why not now? The press underestimated him. Politicians ridiculed him. But the public loved him. With a mix of charisma, motivational phrases, nods to his films, and a straightforward style, he won a special election with more than 4 million votes. He became the 38th governor of California. And he wasn't a window dressing. Arnold rolled up his sleeves. He fought for environmental reform, the state budget, emissions reduction, and public health laws. He was criticized by many. But even his opponents recognized one thing. Arnold worked. A lot. As if the state were another muscle to be sculpted. During his term, he ceased to be just a character. He became a real political figure, one that even many Republicans saw as a bridge between extremes. And yes, there were also controversies, frustrations, unpopular measures, and mistakes. But that was part of the game. When his second term ended in 2011, he didn't return to film immediately. First, he took the time to think about what came next. After all, how do you continue a life like that? Bonus 1. The mirror doesn't lie. Fame has a strange way of wrapping itself around you. It flatters, blinds, and slowly replaces reflection with projection. You start to believe the posters. The applause becomes addictive. You chase it like a drug, not even realizing when the high begins to wear off. Arnold had it all. Muscle carved into legend. Films turning into franchises. Every room he walked into tilted in his direction. But there's a moment, and it comes quietly, when the crowd fades, the lights go off, and you're left staring at a mirror. And the mirror doesn't lie. It doesn't care how much money you've made. It doesn't care how many catchphrases you've coined or how big your biceps are. It reflects not what the world sees, but what you've been avoiding. In that silence, Arnold began to see a different kind of challenge. Not a villain to punch, not a weight to lift, but a man with flaws, regrets, and a past that couldn't be edited out in post-production. He saw the version of himself that wasn't famous. The one who still remembered the smell of his childhood home. The fear of not being enough. The need to conquer, and the price of always needing more. He started waking up earlier, not for workouts, but for walks. For thinking. For facing the internal noise that success had been drowning out. He thought about his father. About how power without kindness becomes fear. About how discipline without compassion becomes coldness. And how legacy, without love, is just noise. The gym was still his temple, but now the silence between reps mattered more. He was lifting, yes, but also unpacking. Trauma, ambition, guilt. He wasn't chasing a new record. He was trying to meet the version of himself who wasn't performing. This was the moment Arnold began to understand a deeper truth. The greatest transformation isn't physical. It's internal, not about becoming more, but becoming real. He didn't post about it. He didn't make it part of a campaign. But slowly, this version of Arnold began influencing the choices he made. The way he treated people on set. The way he listened instead of interrupting. The way he looked at his reflection not as a brand, but as a man in process. It was this unseen evolution, this invisible rep, that made him ready for the next phase. Not just to play power, but to hold it. To take all that fame, muscle, and momentum, and aim it at something bigger than himself. But it all began here, alone, in front of a mirror, where the ego cracks, and the truth walks in. Chapter 5. Lights, Camera, Rust. When Arnold stepped away from politics, people weren't sure what came next. But deep down, everyone was wondering the same thing. Will he return to Hollywood? The answer? Absolutely. But Hollywood had changed, and so had he. In 2013, at age 66, Arnold made his official comeback as a leading man in The Last Stand. A good old-fashioned action flick. Guns, explosions, chase scenes, all the classics. But something was off. Audiences didn't connect. The film bombed at the box office. Critics were brutal. The Last Stand, for Schwarzenegger's career, The Terminator returns to irrelevance. Outgunned and outdated. For any other actor, this would have been the final curtain. But this was Arnold, a man forged from iron. Failure didn't scare him, it fueled him. He kept showing up. Smaller roles in The Expendables. More Terminator films, playing a grizzled, worn-down version of the T-800. None of them blockbusters. But each was a reminder. He's still here. And then something unexpected happened. Arnold evolved. He became more than just a movie star. He transformed into a public icon. On social media, he wasn't just promoting movies. He was inspiring people. Gym tips, life advice, political commentary, motivational speeches, even feeding his pet donkey and pony in his kitchen. He became a kind of digital age philosopher. Part action hero, part grandpa, part Terminator of excuses. Hollywood may not have embraced his comeback with open arms, but the internet and the world did. In that respect, it wasn't about the roles anymore. It was about the journey. Arnold had lived not one, but 3 lifetimes. A poor Austrian boy turned bodybuilding legend. A global movie megastar. A governor of California. Now he was writing the 4th. Mentor. Legacy. Legend. A man who taught us all that you can rise, fall, and rise again. Not by being perfect, but by always coming back. Chapter 6. The Iron Mentor. In a world saturated with motivational speakers, fake gurus, and flashy 10 steps to success, Arnold Schwarzenegger chose to take a different route. He didn't shout. He didn't sell a dream wrapped in glitter. He sat down, wrote emails, showed up, and did what he always had, the work. At a stage in life where most slow down, Arnold shifted gears, not to rest, but to teach. Not with lectures, but with consistency. He became something entirely unexpected, a global mentor. Through a free daily newsletter called The Pump Club, he began sending out short, straight-to-the-point thoughts every morning. These weren't cheesy quotes or feel-good fluff. They were real, they were grounded, and they were coming from someone who had actually lived them. Fitness tips, life perspective, a mindset for winning, not in competitions, but in ordinary life. The emails became a morning ritual for millions, not because Arnold was trying to be a guru, but because he wasn't trying to be one at all. Alongside his digital mentoring, Arnold made another bold move. He stepped into climate activism. Through the Austrian World Summit, he gathered world leaders, environmental experts, and business figures to tackle one of the planet's biggest challenges. But he didn't sugarcoat things. He stood on stage, stared into the cameras, and said what most were too afraid to. We have the tools. We have the knowledge. What we lack is courage. When Arnold said it, people listened, not because of his title, but because of his track record. He didn't lecture from a throne. He spoke from experience. But perhaps the most powerful shift wasn't in what he did. It was in how he measured success. No longer in box office numbers or political polls. Arnold's new mission was simple: help one person every day. That was the rule. Whether it was a comment, a podcast, an email, or a personal reply, if it improved someone's life, it counted. That's the Arnold we see now. Not lifting weights, but lifting others. Not chasing trophies, but chasing purpose. He still trains, still wakes up at 5 a.m., still feeds his donkey and miniature pony every morning. But his greatest legacy may not be the muscles, the movies, or even the office he once held. It may be this quiet chapter of impact. The chapter where the strongest man in the room decided to become the softest voice of guidance in a world full of noise. Chapter 7. The Last Transformation. It's strange, isn't it? How a man who once embodied physical perfection has come to stand for something so much deeper. In his youth, Arnold Schwarzenegger was an icon of muscle. Then he became a symbol of ambition. Later, a political anomaly. And now, in a world that glorifies superficiality, he has become a quiet force for authenticity. That's not a rebrand. That's evolution. In this phase of life, Arnold didn't reinvent himself for relevance. He reconnected with his roots, not the Austrian village, but the mental roots of discipline, service, and balance. He often says now, if you're not useful, you're useless. That's not just a line. It's a rule that drives everything he does today. He no longer seeks applause. He seeks alignment between what he values and how he lives. That's why his routines remain unshaken. Wake up early, feed the animals, move the body, stimulate the mind, and help others. To outsiders, that might look simple. To Arnold, it's sacred. Representatives, reps. He once said about building muscle. Now he says it about character. And make no mistake, this isn't retirement. This is just a different game. He writes. He teaches. He collaborates. He shows up. He laughs at himself. He posts blurry selfies. He makes bad jokes in his thick accent and doesn't care if people laugh with him or at him. That's not weakness. That's confidence earned over decades. Behind the sunglasses, behind the legend, is a man who has faced mortality, loneliness, and regret, and turned those into tools, not excuses. He admits to his failures, talks openly about his mistakes, and he doesn't hide behind perfect lighting or PR teams. This Arnold is more transparent, more accessible, and perhaps more powerful than ever. He says the gym still teaches him every day. Not about muscles, but about showing up even when you don't want to. About giving your best even when nobody's watching. About how strength isn't built in silence, but in resistance. That's the message now. That's the real pumping iron. This last transformation isn't about winning elections or starring in blockbusters. It's about living a meaningful life and helping others build theirs. It's not a climax. It's a handoff. And in that handoff, we find his true legacy. Not a flexing pose, but an extended arm, reaching out, lifting up, and saying, you can do this too. Chapter 8. Becoming the Legacy. What do you leave behind when you've already done everything? Fame? Check. Fortune? Check. Physical immortality carved in bronze? Done. Political power, cultural impact, generational inspiration? All accounted for. And yet, in this final chapter, Arnold isn't chasing what he leaves behind. He's chasing who he becomes when all the noise fades. Legacy isn't built on trophies or titles. It's built on repetition, on choices made in silence, on consistency when no one is watching, Arnold's story has taught us that success isn't one big moment. It's a series of small, deliberate wins stacked daily like bricks. Gym sessions, rewrites, apologies, promises kept, kindness extended. That's the true architecture of legacy. Now, when Arnold speaks, he's not trying to impress. He's trying to transfer wisdom, discipline, humor, pain, all wrapped in stories that crack you up and make you think. He talks about how the barbell taught him more than most universities, how politics taught him humility, and how aging taught him gratitude. He's not a preacher. He's a practitioner. His social media is a strange mix of selfies, animal updates, training tips, and life advice, but it works. Why? Because it's not calculated. It's real. It's the raw, unfiltered Arnold. The one who doesn't pretend to be perfect. The one who owns his scars and smiles through the chaos. This final act is about making his life useful, not glamorous. He donates. He speaks. He mentors. He shows up at places without fanfare. He trains like a man who's still chasing a goal. But it's not about abs anymore. It's about impact. His strength now isn't measured in inches or pounds. It's measured in lives touched. And maybe that's the most heroic part of all. That the man who once played a machine has grown into a teacher, a guardian of values, a reminder that greatness isn't loud. It's earned quietly over time. He doesn't chase the spotlight. He creates light for others to step into. Arnold's journey was never really about muscles or movies or politics. It was about proving to himself and then to the world that no origin, no failure, no detour can stop someone who refuses to quit. And now, at the summit of experience, he's not resting. He's reaching back down the mountain, extending a calloused hand to anyone daring to climb. So if there's a final message from Arnold Schwarzenegger, it might be this. Don't just admire a legacy. Become one. Bonus 2. The man after the myth. There comes a time when applause fades. Not because people stop clapping, but because you no longer need it. Arnold had lived lifetimes inside a single one. He had been poor and rich, weak and strong, obscure and iconic. His story had been written in iron, projected in cinemas, shouted in politics, and whispered in quiet admiration. But what happens when the noise stops? He found out slowly. The roles got fewer, the headlines less frequent. But the silence? The silence was kind. It brought clarity and perspective. He wasn't chasing legacy anymore. He was living it, not in speeches or statues, but in how he mentored young people, in how he apologized when he was wrong, in how he opened up about mistakes, about failures, about being human after being superhuman for so long. He began to understand something few ever do. Greatness is not in being remembered, but in being useful. He taught kids how to lift weights, not to build bodies, but to build confidence. He spoke about discipline, not to impress, but to inspire. He showed up not as the Terminator, but as Arnold, the man who still believed in work ethic, humility, and second chances. He no longer needed the camera. His spotlight was in the eyes of the next generation. And he cherished that more than any Oscar. He still worked out, still read, still laughed loudly at bad jokes. But now, each day was less about conquering the world and more about being at peace with himself. And in the quiet of his home, walls decorated with trophies, but also children's drawings and handwritten thank you notes, Arnold sat back and smiled. He had been the myth, but now he was just the man, and that was more than enough.